of Higher Education and Research. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar organized by Sri Ramachandra Department of Occupational Therapy in association with the Tamil Nadu branch of IOTA on the topic, the Comprehensive Holistic Rehabilitation Program for Persons with Traumatic Brain Injury and OT Perspective. I request our HOD, Raghuram sir, to invite all the participants and the speaker.
Good morning, madam. Good morning to all. I welcome all the participants on behalf of our Department of Occupational Therapy, Srigar. And I'm really very happy to welcome our guest speaker, Sam sir. I really like his personality. I was inspired most of his session. So, sir, welcome you, sir.
Thanks, Raghuram.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I hope everyone liked this session because I know the importance of this topic and about the Sam sir presentation. Over to Rima, ma'am.
Thank you, Raghuram sir. So our speaker for today is Dr. Samuel Kamlesh Kumar, and it gives me immense pleasure to introduce him to you because I was his student, and he is known as Sam sir among the student and staff in CMC. Me and my friends have often been very amazed of sir's ability to remember. Many times when I teach, I rely on resources like notes and PowerPoint presentations, but when sir takes a class, his experience and knowledge is so vast that he can take class and he can teach without any of those resources. Dr. Samuel is currently working as a reader and in charge of occupational therapy services in Christian Medical College, Vellore. He graduated from the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR University. He did his diploma in rehabilitation from All India Institute of PMR, Physical Medical Rehabilitation, Mumbai. He pursued his MOT in neuro rehabilitation from the Manipal University. He worked as an assistant professor in SRM College of OT. In CMC, he has worked as a lecturer and in charge of OT services in the Rehabilitation Institute. He was one of the contributor for the revision of BOT syllabus given by the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR University, and he also revised BOT syllabus in OT College of JIPMER. He has been actively involved in the field of research and he has authored and co-authored many journals. He is a part of collaborative research project between the Imperial College of London and CMC Vellore. He has visited the Human Robotics Division at the Imperial College of London. He is an expert in using evidence-based practice and client-centered practice. He also organized, presented and participated in various workshops, CMEs and conferences. He is handling various responsibilities in academic, clinical and administrative section of OT department in CMC Vellore. Sir is very passionate about occupational therapy in rehabilitation and always motivate his colleagues and students in learning. It is a privilege to have you here, sir. Now I request you to address the participants. Thank you.
Thanks, Rima, for your kind words. And I'd like to thank Raghuram for giving me this opportunity to present in this webinar. Are you all able to hear my voice clearly? Any feedback from anybody?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. If someone is having any difficulties, please comment it on the chat box. If you are not able to see the presentation or the voice is clear, please comment on the chat section.
Okay. Shall I go ahead now?
Yes, sir. I don't.
Yeah, thanks, Rima. Yeah, today I'll be presenting on comprehensive holistic rehabilitation program for persons with traumatic brain injury from the perspective of occupational therapy. Before I proceed to my presentation, I would like to give a brief introduction about the institute where I'm working. I'm working in Christian Medical College, Vellore, and as Rima has introduced, I was part of the Rehabilitation Institute, which is one of the biggest rehabilitation institute in Asia. And this institute was founded by a physiatrist whose name is Miss Dr. Mary Varghese. When she was studying MBBS in CMC Vellore, during one of her home visits during her internship, she met with an accident and she became paraplegic. And many of you who are participating in this webinar maybe heard about Dr. Paul Brand, who has done so many hand surgery, and his surgeries are written in so many orthopedic books. So Dr. Paul Brand was the motivating person for Dr. Mary Varghese. So he used to visit Mary Varghese very often in those times. And I'm talking about around like 1950s. So Dr. Paul Brand motivated Mary Varghese to pursue MD PMR. So later on, Dr. Mary Varghese became a paraplegic. She went to Australia. She did her MD PMR, and then she went on to US PhD, and then she came back and started this rehabilitation institute in the year 1966. So comprehensive rehabilitation for spinal cord injury began very early, that is from 1966 to till date. And the comprehensive program for traumatic brain injury was started in the year 2005. So this rehabilitation institute is catering to traumatic brain injury patients for the past 15 plus years. So basically, most of my presentation will be based on the model what we practice in our rehabilitation institute, CMC Vellore. So in this presentation, I'll be covering three important aspects. One is traumatic brain injury, the facts and figures, and then I'll be talking on understanding traumatic brain injury. And then towards my end of my presentation, I'll be talking about traumatic brain injury rehabilitation that is happening in CMC Vellore. So moving on to the first topic, that is the facts and figures of traumatic brain injury. These facts and figures are based on the global burden of disease study, which was conducted in 2016. According to this study, globally, there were around 369 new cases were reported out of 1 lakh population in the year 2016, which is almost 3.6% increase from the previous data, which was published in 1990. So that means from 1990 to 2016, there were about 3.6% increase of new cases of traumatic brain injury globally. And then when you look at the prevalence is number of traumatic brain injury patients who were living that time. So in 2016, there were around 5.5 crores people with traumatic living all around the world, which is increased compared to the 1990s. And most of these traumatic brain injuries were resulting from either falls and followed by road traffic injuries. This is the global statistics. When compared this with India, the same study reported that around 455 new cases were reported out of 1 lakh population, which is slightly higher than the global statistics. This is the incidence. And the prevalence wise, almost 1 crore patients with traumatic brain injury were living in the year 2016 in India, which is almost 1/5 of the total, like the global statistics. Like I mentioned that the prevalence, global prevalence of traumatic brain injury in 2016 is 5.5 crores. And in that 1 crore people were living only in India. And then among the people who had traumatic brain injuries, majority of them were like the traumatic brain injury was resulting from road traffic accidents, around 55.5%, followed by falls around 30%. So remaining brain injuries are resulting from either gunshot injuries or other mode of injuries. And this study also reported that almost 1/4 of the world's trauma deaths were occurring in India alone. Yes, Rima?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, someone else pressed the present now button. Can you
Okay.
restart the presentation?
Yeah, just.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, just.
I request the participants not to press the present now button. It is going to interrupt the speaker. So please do not press the present now button.
Is that okay now, Rima? Or
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
fine. So I'll just repeat the Indian statistics alone. I don't know when it was interrupted. Yeah. So in India, the incidence was around 455 per 1 lakh population, like TBI. That many new cases were reported in the year 2016, and the prevalence was around 1 crore, which is 1/5 of the total cases present in the world. And then majority of them were had traumatic brain injury because of the road traffic accident, which is 55.5%, and falls was the next cause of traumatic brain injury, which is around 30%. And this study also reported that around 1/4 of the world's trauma deaths were occurring in India. So these statistics giving us the alarm that many traumatic brain injury patients are living in India, and also year by year, so many people are getting affected with traumatic brain injury. And it shows the global statistics in different countries. If you see the bottom of the screen, I have mentioned the different incident rates reported in different countries, like 200 to 299, 300 to 399, like that. And some countries like Australia, South America, so these countries have reported very less incidence of traumatic brain injuries, which is ranging from 200 to 299. And then followed by countries like China and America and Canada. These countries are reporting around 300 to 399 cases out of 1 lakh population. And then comes India, which is reporting around 400 to 499 cases per 1 lakh population. And very few countries like Middle East countries and some part of Russia and China are reporting very high incidence rate, which is crossing 900 cases out of 1 lakh. Yeah, we'll move on to the understanding the traumatic brain injury. We'll be doing that in 4 subtopics. One is measuring the severity, how to measure the severity of traumatic brain injury. And second, how it is impacting the individual's life and how it is impacting their family. And finally, we'll be discussing on the recovery process following the traumatic brain injury. Measuring the severity, there are 3 systems available to measure the severe traumatic brain injury. First one is the Glasgow Coma Scale. You are aware of this Glasgow Coma Scale, which is very widely used all over the world. If any patient has road traffic accident which is resulting in traumatic brain injury, as soon as they report to the casualty, this is the first scale the consultants will use to find out the severity of traumatic brain injury. And the initial GCS score, which is taken within hours of traumatic brain injury, is very, very crucial. That helps in predicting the outcome also. So the GCS score is ranging from 3 to 15, where higher the score indicates better prognosis. So based on GCS, severity of brain injury can be classified as mild traumatic brain injury, moderate and severe. So if the patient gets a score between 13 and 15, a patient said to have mild traumatic brain injury, and moderate traumatic brain injury if the scores are ranging from 9 to 12, and severe traumatic brain injury if the scores are ranging between 3 to 8. And second system that is available to classify traumatic brain injury severity is post-traumatic amnesia. This post-traumatic amnesia is time when the patient loses his memory and then when he is regaining the memory. That is when he is like aware about the surroundings. So that period is called the post-traumatic amnesia. And post-traumatic amnesia period is less than 1 day. Say for example, person had a traumatic brain injury, but he has regained his memory within 24 hours time. So that means that patient had mild traumatic brain injury, and moderate traumatic brain injury is ranging from more than 1 day to less than 7 days. So that is moderate traumatic brain injury. And severe traumatic brain injury is if the memory, if the patient lost memory for more than 7 days, then that patient is said to have severe traumatic brain injury. And third system that is helping us in identifying the severity of traumatic brain injury is loss of consciousness, duration of loss of consciousness. If the patient lost his consciousness for less than 30 minutes, and then that patient has said to have mild traumatic brain injury. And if the loss of consciousness is extending from like more than 30 minutes to less than 24 hours, then moderate traumatic brain injury. And if the consciousness is persisting for more than 24 hours, then the person is having severe traumatic brain injury. I provided the reference towards the bottom of this slide. Yeah, after identifying the severity of traumatic brain injury, second important point that we need to understand is the impact of traumatic brain injury, because the traumatic brain injury impacts the person in different aspects of his life. So therefore, I've used the ICF classification system. ICF is International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. Previously, we were using ICIDH model, which is International Classification of Impairment, Disability and Handicap. So these models are helping us to understand the consequences of any disease, illnesses or injuries. For example, if the person gets any disease, injury or illness, it affects the person in 3 levels. One is the body level, which is otherwise called as impairment according to the old system. Impairment, anatomical or physiological, in anatomical problem in any anatomical structure or physiological loss of functions. And then in turn, this impairment may cause problem in activity performance. That is called disability according to the older system. And third one is handicap. Because of impairment and disability, if the person is not able to fulfill his or her role, that becomes a handicap for that individual. This is ICIDH model. But currently the ICF model is used worldwide, because ICIDH model is just focusing on the negative aspect of the individual. That is what is not there in the individual. The ICF model, it gives us the scope to assess both disability and also the functioning aspect. With the available disability, what the person is doing, that is covered in the ICF model, so which is very widely used worldwide. So based on this ICF model, we can classify the problems that patient is having in 3 levels. One is, as I said, body level, that is called body structure and function. That includes voluntary motor control. Patient may have problem in voluntary motor control, or he may have problem in balance, posture, equilibrium, cognition, or emotional regulation. So all these factors will come under the body structure and function, which is equivalent to impairment. And second, because of this body structure and function problems, patient may have problem in performing their activity. That includes basic ADL, instrumental activities of daily living, leisure, and various other activities of life. And third is, because of this, patient may have restriction in participation in their work and then in their community. So traumatic brain injury causes problem not just in their individual level, that is body level, but it also affects their activity and their participation also. So this is very, very important to know. Again, coming back to the body structure and functioning, what are the various problems that patients with traumatic brain injury are having? They have problem in their altered consciousness, then they have problem in their physical skills, then intellectual problems, communication problems, behavioral changes, emotional changes, and sensory problems. All these are the problems related to body structure and functioning. And second problem what the traumatic brain injury patients will have is, it will affect their activity and participation. I've clubbed both activity and participation because we can't separate these two practically. So 9 different activities I have mentioned which are affected because of the traumatic brain injury. One is the learning and applying knowledge will be affected. Second, the general task and demands, whatever the task that they do, that they will not be able to do after the traumatic brain injury. Then it affects their communication skills, as speaking, understanding, everything will get affected. Then it affects their mobility, self-care, then domestic life, that home integration, then interpersonal interactions and relationships, and major life such as going to work or going to school. So these areas will be affected. And finally, community, social and civic life. So these are the 9 different areas of activities that will be affected because of the traumatic brain injury. So the traumatic brain injury affects not just the body, the individual, but it also affects the activity. And third, it also impacts the family members also. If a person if a person met with an accident, that if that is resulting in traumatic brain injury, it affects the family members too. First, the family members have to provide support and care to patients with traumatic brain injury. So what happens is they have to look after themselves. In addition to that, they have to take care of the patient with traumatic brain injury. So they may not have adequate time to spend with different family members. So they have less time. Second, it causes so much of financial constraint within the family. Suppose if the person gets traumatic brain injury, it causes so much of expenditure because traumatic brain injury won't recover in days or weeks time. It takes a very long time. So because of that, the family members have to financially support this individual. So that gives a great burden on them. And second, it causes the role changes within the family. Suppose if the breadwinner of the family gets traumatic brain injury, so there will be a role change. The spouse have to take care of the family now. The spouse have to go for work, and entire family dynamics will change because of this. And fourth is communication problem. Suppose if the patient is not able to communicate, this causes so much of disruption within the family. Family members cannot understand what the person is saying, and similarly, the patient cannot understand what the family members are saying. That will cause so much of disharmony within the family. And last is the lack of support. If the family doesn't get the support from others, the relatives and all, that causes even more problems. So the traumatic brain injury not only affects the individual, it also affects the entire family members. The fourth aspect that we need to understand is the recovery process following traumatic brain injury. So 100 years back or 50 years back, there were not much theories which are talking about brain reorganization, which is called plasticity, neuronal plasticity. Plasticity meaning, like this word is derived from the word plastic. Plastic meaning it is moldable. That means brain can be moldable. With training and with practice, the brain can reorganize its function. So that is called the plasticity. So the plasticity, like in the recent years, many people have proposed different theories of like how plasticity is taking place. One is one theory talks about the incomplete damage. When the brain injury occurs, it is not affecting the entire brain. There are parts which are not affected by the trauma. So these parts which are not affected take over the function of the affected regions. This is one theory. Second theory I mentioned, that other parts. That means the researchers have found that throughout our lifetime, we are using very less percentage of our brain synapses. So that means many brain neurons or many neurons are still not functioning. So what happens when the injury happens? These silent neurons will take over the function of the active neurons, or other way, the inactive neurons take over the function of the active neurons after the brain damage. That's the second concept. And third concept says that it talks about the new connections. There are many new connections that are taking place after the traumatic brain injury. The brain itself starts new rewiring within itself that causes the plasticity. So that means right now there is definite idea or concept that brain reorganization is happening. So if you look at the stage recovery, like if the person has mild traumatic brain injury, then it follows a different course. But if the patient has moderate or severe traumatic brain injury, they may go through these stages. Initially, the patient may be in coma, which is complete loss of consciousness. So at this stage, the person will not have any responses or any consciousness at all. So coma is the state where the person cannot be aroused even with very vigorous stimulation, and there is no sleep-wake cycle. So that state is called coma. And the second stage is vegetative state. Recently, they've renamed this state, which is unresponsive wakefulness syndrome. Unresponsive wakefulness syndrome. So in this vegetative state, the person will have sleep-wake cycle preserved. The only difference between coma and vegetative state is, in coma, there is no sleep-wake cycle, but in vegetative state, person will have sleep-wake cycle preserved. But in addition to that, like recently, people have added some more points into this vegetative state. Suppose if the person has reflexive responses like facial grimacing or grinding teeth, these kind of reflexive responses, they are put under vegetative state. So coma, complete loss of consciousness, no sleep-wake cycle. Vegetative state, sleep-wake cycle is preserved, plus some reflexive responses will be observed in vegetative state. And the third state is minimal conscious state. This minimal conscious state is one step higher than the vegetative state, where the patient will have some spontaneous movement and purposeful movement. Spontaneous movement in the sense, suppose they themselves will be able to move their limbs, but not on command. But in purposeful movement, meaning the person will be able to move the limb for any external stimulus. So that is called the in the minimal conscious state, they have spontaneous and purposeful movement. And the last stage is called emergence from minimal conscious state. So the person will be moving out of the minimal state and they may have more awareness. So that means in this stage, the person will be out of post-traumatic amnesia. That means they'll start knowing their surroundings. That comes only in the emergence from minimal conscious state. This is how the person with traumatic brain injury who had severe brain injury may go through these stages. And then, yeah, so far we have discussed about the facts, briefly we discussed about the facts and figures in traumatic brain injury. And then I moved on to the understanding traumatic brain injury, like based on the severity of traumatic brain injury, and then impact on the individual, impact on the family, and the recovery process following the traumatic brain injury. Now we'll move on to the TBI rehabilitation that is happening in CMC Vellore. I have put a care pathway that is happening in CMC. If you Google care pathway for different conditions, for example, stroke or cancer or traumatic brain injury, you can find different care pathways that are being followed in different centers. There are many studies are also published in that. I'm going to just show what is the care pathway that is being followed in CMC. Suppose if the patient gets traumatic brain injury, he'll be coming to the casualty, and in the casualty, apart from providing the emergency trauma care, and they will be evaluating the patient's severity of injury. The severity is mild. If the patient has mild traumatic brain injury, then he'll be discharged from casualty directly to home, and the patient will be asked to report to the brain injury clinic, which is happening on every Wednesday, so once in a week. So in the brain injury clinic, it is a multidisciplinary clinic where a group of rehab professionals will be there, including the neurosurgeons, neurologists, physiatrists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, and speech therapists, some even social workers, psychologists. Everyone will be there as a team. So when the patient comes, there will be quick evaluation of the patient, and according to the patient problems, necessary intervention strategies will be started. And at home only, like after the brain injury clinic, the patient will ask to come to the brain injury clinic only like weekly once, and once the patient is ready to go to the community completely, he can stop coming to the brain injury clinic. This is one group. Second, from the casualty, if the patient is like patient had moderate to severe traumatic brain injury, and if he is medically stable, patient may be directly referred to PMR. And when the patient comes to PMR is physical medicine and rehabilitation. When the patient comes to PMR, again decision will be taken whether the patient needs inpatient rehabilitation or outpatient. If it is outpatient rehabilitation, patient will be attending occupational therapy and physiotherapy and speech therapy on an OP basis. Whatever the underlying problem the patient is having, like related to mobility or upper limb dysfunctions, cognition, or any other psychosocial issues, speech difficulties, all these things will be addressed on an OP basis. And then following that, patient will be asked to be under follow-up, like a rehabilitation team will visit the patient once in a month or so. So that is happens through this pathway. Suppose if the patient is needing inpatient admission, then the patient will be admitted initially in acute care center, where again OT, PT, and speech therapy will be provided for them based on their problems. And once the acute care is over, patient will be referred to the long-term care, which is happening at the rehabilitation center. And the care what we provide is called Comprehensive Holistic Rehabilitation Program. I'll be describing that in the forthcoming slides. So in the long-term care, once the long-term care is over, patient will be discharged to the community, and follow-up will be done through home visits. This follow-up is being done for patients who are residing within 100-kilometer radius from our rehabilitation center. For those patients who are coming far away from our center, we won't be able to provide the follow-up, but they'll be asked to continue the follow-up in their own places. So only for those patients who are staying within 100-kilometer radius from our center, we provide home visits, and I'll be describing what is MELA in the next slides. So what we provide in the acute care, what is the role of an occupational therapist in the acute care? In terms of assessment, our main focus is on assessing their consciousness and cognition. These two are the important aspect. Apart from that, we do other things also, but I would like to highlight these two alone, assessing the consciousness and the cognition. And the intervention wise, one of the important interventions that is being followed in the acute care is sensory stimulation. We commonly call as coma stimulation, but the correct word is sensory stimulation. And then preventing the secondary complication, that is tightness, contraction, and deformities. These are happening at the acute care. Now, how can we assess the levels of consciousness? Like as I said, the fundamental scale is Glasgow Coma Scale, which is used by neurologists, physiatrists, or anybody, any other rehabilitation professionals, which I've already talked about. And the second scale, which is very common, is Ranchola's Omega Scale, or it is called as RLA. Many of you may be aware of this scale. So Ranchola's Omega Scale helps us to understand the cognitive state of the patient. So it ranges from level 1 to level 8. Different levels are there, starting from no response, generalized response, localized response, to automatic and purposeful appropriate stage. And recently, based on the levels of assistance provided, 2 more levels have been added. That is 9 and 11. 9 and 10. So altogether 10 levels are there. So that is Ranchola's Omega Scale. And third scale, which is being used, is Coma Recovery Scale. And this is called as Coma Recovery Scale Revised, CRSR. And this scale has got 6 subscales in it. See this Coma Recovery Scale in the screen. Coma Recovery Scale Revised. And this has got 6 sub-items like auditory function scale, visual function scale, motor function scale, and then oromotor, verbal function scale, and communication scale. And if you look at this, there will be, you can find there is symbols are mentioned here. So these are helping us to understand what is the stage the patient is in, whether the patient is in minimal conscious state, or whether the patient in vegetative state, or still is in coma. So the importance of this Coma Recovery Scale is that it helps us to understand the stage of the patient. So that is the importance of this Coma Recovery Scale. And second scale is the Wessex Head Injury Matrix, which is called WIM. So this scale is also used at National Medical College, Vellore, and this scale is has 62 items. 62 items are there, and ranging from like some small simple responses to complex behaviors. And item 62 is almost like response are relating to coming out of post-traumatic amnesia. Now, if you look at this scale, it assesses 2 important aspects. One is number of the most advanced behavior observed. I said there are 62 items in this scale, and the items are ranging from less response to more better response, right? So in that case, like this says that number of the most advanced behavior. Suppose 20th item is the response the patient has given, or 30th item, or 40th item. I'll show you what are they. So that is the most advanced behavior observed. And second one is total number of behaviors observed during the session. Suppose the patient has 40th response observed during the assessment, but within that 40th assessment, 40th response item, how many responses the patient has given during that session. Suppose it may be 10, it may be 12. So that we will record total number of behaviors observed. Now, if you look at this scale, some responses are like eye open briefly, or eye open for extended period. So the items are starting like this, very simple responses, and then it goes like that, and finally towards the higher items. If you see 60, 61, 61, or 62 says out of post-traumatic amnesia. That means patient regains his consciousness, memory, and all. So the scale is ranging like this. So we are recording 2 important aspects. One is the most advanced behavior, and second one is the number of responses that are being observed during the session. This graph helps us to understand how we can interpret the Wessex Head Injury Matrix assessment. Suppose if you look at the first graph, I have mentioned about total number of behaviors observed during the session, total number of behaviors. This y-axis talks about the WIM scale, that is ranging from 1 to 60, and then admission score, 1 month score, 2 month. This we can decide whether we are doing one every day or weekly wise. That individual centers can decide, and then we can mention like what is the admission score, then 1 month later, 2 months or 2 months like that, and we can plot it on a graph and see how to interpret the scoring. Okay, so this Wessex head injury matrix is helping us to understand the recovery pattern each patient. Similarly, the graph which is shown below talks about the total number of behaviors. First one is the most advanced behavior. Second one is the total number of behaviors that are being observed during the rehabilitation. So this Wessex head injury matrix is helping us to understand the recovery pattern. So that helps us to decide whether to continue the treatment. Suppose if you look at this graph, this line, this goes like, this shows the plateau stage. That means patient is not improving at all. So patient is in vegetative state for a very prolonged period of time. So then there is no point in keeping this patient for a prolonged period of time. So we can give them a home program and send. So the Wessex head injury matrix actually helping us to find out the trend of recovery following the traumatic brain injury. Then in the acute care, again, we use different cognitive scales or instruments. Many of you are aware, many mental status examination. Sometimes we may use MOCA also, that is Montreal Cognitive Assessment. So very similar to MMSE, but it is even more simpler. And third one is Addenbrook's Cognitive Examination. This is a revised version from the many mental status examination. They've added few more components in it to get better picture of this. One more advantage of this Addenbrook's Cognitive Examination is like we have a cutoff score in this. Suppose if the patient gets a score of 70 or out of 100, the total score of AS3 is 100. If the patient gets a score of 70, he is ready for return to work. So that criteria, the cutoff is there. So that helps us to identify which patient can go back to work. And last one, Lowensteen Occupational Therapy Cognitive Assessment, LOTCA, which we use to identify specific cognitive deficits. And the second thing what we do in acute care is multimodal sensory stimulation for patients who are ranging between RLA stage 1 to 3, and different modalities we use to stimulate different senses like auditory, gustatory, kinesthetic, vestibular, and proprioception. These are the different ways we provide sensory stimulation to the patient, and then we stimulate them. There are many literature which talks about how to stimulate, what are the principles to be followed, what are the guidelines to be followed. So interested people can go through those literature. So in the acute care, we provide sensory stimulation. And second important focus is preventing the secondary complications. Like if the patient is in coma or vegetative state for a prolonged period of time, they may develop tightness, contracture, deformities. So to prevent tightness, contracture, deformities, we may have to teach them the correct position, meaning teach the relatives to position the patient on the bed, like what are the types of positions that we need to maintain. And then like orthopedic, like orthotic management, like providing them splints, upper extremity and lower extremity orthosis to prevent the TCDs. And then we'll teach them how to prevent shoulder subluxation, like how to handle them in the bed, how to position them to prevent a subluxation. That we'll teach them. Then pressure sore management, which is again a very important thing, because if the patient is in vegetative state for a prolonged period of time, he may develop pressure sores. So we'll teach the relatives how to take care of that. And then heterotropic ossification, that is new bone growth formation. So that again, we'll have to teach the relatives how to do passives, and like along with the physiotherapists, we teach them all those stuff. Then deep vein thrombosis, due to the prolonged bed rest, there will be stagnation of blood in the lower limbs, which may cause DVT, deep vein thrombosis. So that may cause sometimes, that may be life-threatening also. So these secondary complications have to be handled carefully. So the important aspect of traumatic brain injury care is the long-term care. Most of the moderate to severe traumatic brain injury patients to be admitted to continue the rehabilitation. And that care, we call it as Comprehensive Holistic Rehabilitation Program, CHRP. So in the next few slides, I'll be talking about what is this Comprehensive Holistic Rehabilitation Program, how it has evolved, and how we are providing that in Rehabilitation Institute. And towards the end, I'll be presenting the effectiveness of CHRP are experienced. There is a person called Kurt Goldstein, who is considered to be the pioneer in this holistic rehabilitation. Holistic rehabilitation, he mentioned that we'll have to provide the traumatic brain injury care or rehabilitation in a environment which is not which is reducing the catastrophic responses from the patient's side. So the brain injury patient need an environment that will minimize the chance of occurrence of catastrophic responses. This is a fundamental belief of Kurt Goldstein, and he was considered to be the pioneer in this holistic rehabilitation. So basically, he said that traumatic brain injury patient should be handled separately in a good environment where the environment will not be very threatening. So they'll have to be handled separately. And based on the works of Kurt Goldstein, there was a person called Yehuda Ben Ishay. He has developed some programs, New York University Head Trauma Program, and his programs highlights are like the intensivity, like meaning the traumatic brain injury care should be very intensive, and second, it should be systematic and well coordinated, and remedial and therapeutic interventions should be designed to restore functions as well as help to deal with interpersonal and intrapersonal difficulties, because traumatic brain injury patients may have both intrapersonal and interpersonal difficulties, like talking to others or communicating with others, or they may have difficulty in controlling their emotions, and they may exhibit so much of psychological issues. So all have to be handled in a comprehensive way. So this was highlighted by Ben Ishay. And following the works of Kurt Goldstein and Ben Ishay, there was a person called Prigatano. He has developed a model called psychotherapy and holistic neuropsychological rehabilitation program at Oklahoma in 1980. Thereafter, he developed a similar model in Phoenix in 1986. They all have proposed that holistic care should be provided for patients with traumatic brain injury. There are other holistic models, which was like one such model was developed by Annie Christiansen at Copenhagen University in 1985, and there was a program called INSURE, Individualized Neuropsychological Subgroup Rehabilitation Program, then Holistic Neuropsychological Rehabilitation by Christensen in 2000, then Intensive Cognitive Rehabilitation Program, ICRP at New Jersey by Cicerone. So there are many different holistic models have been developed, and these models have been tested to be effective. If you Google it like comprehensive holistic rehabilitation programs or intensive cognitive rehabilitation program, you will find so many different models which are developed based on the works of Kurt Goldstein, and they prove that these kind of models are essential for managing patients with traumatic brain injury. So what are these CHRPs? What is the focus of this comprehensive holistic programs? They are designed to develop alternative or compensatory behaviors rather than to restore the underlying dysfunctional cognitive systems. So the main focus of the CHRPs is to develop compensatory behaviors and rather than restoring the underlying dysfunctional cognitive systems, because these problems the patient may have for a prolonged period of time. So we need to help the patient to find different strategies to overcome those cognitive and psychological difficulties. And the focus of CHRPs are three. One, metacognition. Metacognition meaning focusing on self-awareness and executive functions. So self-awareness meaning helping the individual to be aware of himself, what are his strengths and weaknesses. So the therapy has to be given such a way that it helps the patient to identify his limitations and works towards to overcome that. Second is interpersonal functioning. There is another focus of CHRP. Interpersonal functioning meaning how to interact with others, how to overcome the communication challenges, communication difficulties. That is the interpersonal functioning. And third is emotional regulation, how to regulate their own emotions. For example, anger management or apathy, how to handle them. So that has to be one of the focus in CHRP. And model of delivery can be given either individual basis or in a group format. So traumatic brain injury patients cannot be given individual therapy all the time, but we should provide that in a group environment also. So there will be more benefits for the patient if certain problems are handled in a group environment. Second important aspect is a milieu. Milieu meaning the therapeutic environment where the treatment is taking place. So it should be away from the hospital setting, and the patient will be provided treatment in a very conducive environment. So that is very, very crucial in terms of using this comprehensive holistic rehabilitation programs. So some of the key elements of the CHRPs are transdisciplinary model. Transdisciplinary model meaning like different team members will be involving in the care of patients like physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and then speech therapists, psychologists and all. There will be a coordination among them. That's why the second one I mentioned, a positive working alliance with the patients and the families. Even the patient and the family should be aware of what is happening. Each of them should know what are our treatment goals, common treatment goals, and what OT is providing. The physiotherapist should know what physiotherapist is doing. The OT should know. So we'll have to do the service in a coordinated way. And participant as the family is one of the key elements. Then systematic feedback to the family and the patient, and dedicated vocational and independent living trials. So all these are very important for providing the CHRP. Then I'll move on to the service delivery model for TBI at our rehabilitation center. So far, is that okay? Are you all able to follow? Any feedback?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, I'll move on to the service delivery model that is being practiced in our rehabilitation center. So far, I was describing CHRP in common. So how it is being delivered in rehabilitation center, I'll be talking that. Now, first is the holistic approach. Many of us will be hearing this term very frequently, holistic care or holistic approach, but we may not understand what does it mean by. The holistic approach means like the patient may have problem in different areas, like they may have physical problems, emotional, psychological problems, behavioral problems, social, spiritual, and environmental problems. So we can't take different time frames for each of these problems. Suppose, for example, if the patient has physical problem like mobility issues, we can't say that I will address only the physical problem for next 2 months, then I'll move on to emotional, psychological, because it may take a very longer time. So holistic care means all these have to be addressed on a particular time by different professionals. That is called the holistic approach. Second, this is the transdisciplinary team-based model. This is what I mentioned. The transdisciplinary team includes neuropsychiatrists, physiatrists, OTs, physiotherapists, speech therapists, psychologists, social worker, and rehabilitation nurses. So what happens, suppose if you take cognition as problem, like patient is having problem orientation, attention, memory, problem solving, executive function, different team members will be involved in that. Suppose occupational therapists will be handling cognition. Speech therapists may have a role to play, or psychologists may have a role to play. So like each problem, different professionals will be involving and without overlapping with each other. So that's why I said coordinated care is needed. This is called a transdisciplinary team-based model. And second, the integrated care. If you look at this slide carefully, I mentioned whatever the components of rehabilitation for traumatic brain injury. For example, starts with sensory stimulation to functional mobility. You'll have to try to achieve functional mobility, then cognitive retraining, then behavioral management, then caregiver training, which is also very, very crucial in patients with traumatic brain injury, because the patient may have difficulty in understanding what we say. So involving a significant caregiver along with the therapy is very, very important. Then health education, and then therapeutic group activities, then vocational guidance and follow-up. So I'll be describing each one in the coming slides. And another thing is the team composition and meetings, which is very, very important. What is happening in Rehabilitation Institute is the rehabilitation team constitutes all these members, physiatrists, neuropsychiatrists, PTs, OTs. All these members are part of the rehabilitation team, and they meet weekly. Suppose when the patient gets admitted in Rehabilitation Institute, in the first week itself, there will be a formal team meeting. And before that, the patient would be visiting all these different professionals. We carry out our own assessments. And then in the formal meeting, we will be presenting our report. Like occupational therapists will present our report, physiotherapists will present their report. And collectively, the common goal will be set. Suppose for the patient has to stay for 8 weeks or 12 weeks in Rehabilitation Institute, and this is our goal. So that will be discussed in the weekly team meetings. And regular informal meetings happens among the therapists. Physiotherapists will go and talk to physiotherapists to find out what is happening. One physiotherapist, one occupational therapist will form the team, and they will provide the care for patients with traumatic brain injury. So they meet very informally. Suppose physiotherapist found that a patient is not improving, they can come and talk to occupational therapist to find out why this patient is not improving, what is happening in OT, something like that. So constant exchange of ideas happens in these informal meetings. And we have three important assessments taking place during their admission. One is initial assessment, midterm assessment, and pre-discharge assessment. So during this formal week team meeting, we have the initial assessment report, and then we'll set the goals for MTA and PDA. So time also will be fixed. Suppose if the patient has to stay for 12 weeks, then at the end of 6 weeks, we'll do the midterm assessment. So that means rehabilitation is happening in two phases, IA to MTA, that is initial assessment to midterm assessment, and then from midterm assessment to pre-discharge assessment. So it happens in two phases. The first phase, of course, is to enhance skills, helping them to overcome all their problems. That is IA to MTA. Then MTA to PDA, important goal is to prepare them for their community life. So what are the challenges that they will face when they go to the community? Getting trained. This time,
Sir, your voice is breaking.
Yeah. Is it clear now?
Yes.
Rima, is it clear now? Yeah. So in the second
Yes, sir.
phase, that is between MTA to okay, Rima. Yeah. So in the second phase, that is between midterm assessment to pre-discharge assessment, we'll do a home visit to the patient and then identify the barriers in their home. If there are any architectural barriers have to be removed, that will be discussed with the relatives, or whether any modification can be done at the home. So all this thing will be done at this stage, second phase of rehabilitation. And during the pre-discharge assessment, when the team is report the progress of the patient, then we'll discharge the patient to the community life. Then the caregiver training, as I mentioned, for managing traumatic brain injury patients, the caregiver has to be empowered. So the caregiver, one of the significant caregiver, it can be a spouse or children, whoever it is, they have to be with the patient throughout the rehabilitation process. They will be watching, observing, and taking part in the during the rehabilitation period. So they'll be learning everything, whatever the rehabilitation team is providing. So they will be understanding the care. And second, weekly support groups happens. That is what the picture I have shown here. Like every Tuesdays, we have support groups for 1 hour. So where OTs, PTs, social workers conducts these groups, and we will address important problems that patient will go through when they go back to home, and the role changes happens in the family, and because of that, what are the challenges that they will face. So basically, we'll empower them before the discharge. They go back home, they will not have major problems. Another thing what is happening is the health education, which is happening again once in a week. Like health education time, like one of the team member, like every week it comes in rotation, like OTs, PTs, social workers will discuss with the patients various problems that they will face and how to overcome them. Suppose, for example, what are the different cognitive strategies that they can use to help them. All those things will, along with the patient, we will help the relatives to understand the cognitive issues or communication challenges what the patient has, and we'll provide them the strategies also how to face them. Then we provide group therapy, like activity-based group therapy, and we'll help the patient to, like in a group environment, patient will be able to make some activities, and it helps to improve their cognition, their interpersonal skills and all. So that happens in the activity group sessions. And along with that, what happens when we get discharged also, we'll call the patient back, like we'll identify few patients who need support care. So we'll call them once in a month. We'll conduct these kind of group sessions and help them to identify their problems, and we help them to overcome them in the group environment. Then separate counseling and vocational guidance will be provided. Like this is the patient has to attend these sessions with the significant relative, and the rehabilitation professional will discuss the various counseling and vocational, will they provide the vocational guidance to the patient. Then therapeutic recreation, which is again a very important aspect of rehabilitation process. In rehabilitation, what happens is once in a month, we have monthly entertainment programs for our patients. So where we gather all the traumatic brain injury patients together, we will permit them to, like, we'll give them chance to exhibit their talents, and various recreational activities will happen during that time. Apart from that, like whenever we have local festivals like Diwali festival or Pongal festival, Christmas or anything, we have a gathering and we celebrate that along with the patient. That gives them the great motivation, and they'll continue to take part in these kind of events when they go back to home. Then community ambulation, which is again important aspect. So during their admission, once in a while, we take all our patients for a rehab picnic. We call it as rehab picnic. So the Rehabilitation Institute will initiate everything. Like we'll take group of patients to a nearby park or zoo or wherever it is, and then we take the patient. So they will understand how we are planning the picnic and how we are organizing various events there, and how we are taking various safety measures, everything. So these kind of activities will help the patient and the relative to understand the process. Later on, they can take the patients out for various things. Otherwise, the patient is at home, it will be difficult for the patient to progress. So these kind of activities will help the patient to move forwards. And follow-up strategies, some of the follow-up strategies include home visits, regional mela and rehab mela. Home visits happens once in a month. As I already told, we have a 100 kilometers radius, like geographical radius that we have defined, and we will be visiting those patients who are residing within 100 kilometers radius. So the rehabilitation team will visit the patient in their home, identify the problems and help them to overcome it. Many of the times through these home visits, we have learned a lot from the patient, because after they go home, the relatives and along with the patient, like whatever the modification that they have done based on the constraints or strengths what they have at their home, it will be a learning process for the rehabilitation team also. And recently we started the regional melas also. Regional mela meaning, suppose we'll identify a specific area, for example, Tiruvannamalai, Arani, something like that. So those patients who are residing within that particular area will be gathered together. So this initiative is completely from the patient side. One of the patient has to coordinate with other patients and bring all the patients together. So roughly around 30 to 40 patients with their families take part in the regional melas. So the rehabilitation team will go and address their concerns alone. Otherwise, the entire process of coordinating this regional mela is done by the patient themselves. So this again gives them the good networking and all. And another one is the annual follow-up event, which is called rehab mela. So whoever the patient gets discharged from the rehabilitation institute will be called to attend this rehab mela, which is happening once a year, where all the patients will come back to us with their families and take part in this rehab mela. This is again one of the important social network. And during this rehab mela, we also a specific time for assessing their problems. But mostly, we won't spend much time on that, but we used to conduct support groups. We used to invite resource person to come and give a talk to the patients. And also, some of the patient themselves will be like a key person to, like successful patient stories and all will be discussed during the time to motivate the patients. Now, based on our model, we have done few studies also to find out our effectiveness of our model. One study we have conducted, the title of the study is Community Reintegration in Rehabilitated South Indian Persons with Traumatic Brain Injury, Role of this Holistic Rehabilitation Program. The aim is to explore the community reintegration in rehabilitated South Indian persons with TBI who underwent CHRP in our center. And it is a cross-sectional survey. We have included 104 traumatic brain injury who are residing within 100 kilometer radius. The outcome measure what we used was called CHART, that is Craig Handicap Assessment and Reporting Technique. Craig Handicap Assessment and Reporting Technique, CHART assessment that we have used to assess the outcome. And the results you are seeing in this screen now, like CHART has got 6 domains, and the mean CHART scores are mentioned here. Like physical independence, the patient has scored 91 plus or minus 23, social integration 87 plus or minus 20, and cognitive independence so far. So patient have scored better scores in 3 items: physical independence, social integration, and cognitive independence, and moderate scores in economic self-sufficiency, occupation, and mobility. So through the study, what we have identified was persons with TBI in rural South India who have completed comprehensive, mostly self-financed rehabilitation with an emphasis on achieving functional ambulation, family support, and self-employment, and who attend a regular annual follow-up show a high community reintegration. This was the conclusion of that study. And the second study what we have conducted was rehabilitation outcomes of persons with severe traumatic brain injury, a retrospective prospective survey. So we have included only patients with severe traumatic brain injury, and we conducted another study. So the aim of the study was to see the effect of this model on patients with severe traumatic brain injury. So 42% with severe traumatic brain injury were participated in this. The outcomes used were coma recovery scale revised, then Wessex head injury matrix to assess the problems related to their body level, then MBI modified Barthel index to assess their activity performance like ADL, and then CIQ community integration questionnaire to assess their participation outcome. And if you look at the results, patients have scored significant improvement in all of these scales from initial assessment to the discharge assessment, and the CIQ score 9.77 out of 30, which showed low level of community integration. So that means that patients showed good improvement during the admission stay, but during the follow-up, the community integration score was less. So that means for patients with severe traumatic brain injury, still they have continued to have problems in reintegrating into the community. That is what they have identified in this study. So we conclude like patients with severe traumatic brain injury who completed intensive inpatient rehabilitation in our center showed improvements in their consciousness, cognitive, physical, and functional outcomes. But whereas community integration outcome-wise, patients showed low level of community reintegration. So in summary of this presentation, based on our CHRP model, so the neuropsychiatric rehabilitation for persons with TBI needs to be comprehensive and holistic, addressing physical, psychological, behavioral, and emotional problems. The well-coordinated, seamless line of care from the unit to acute care to long-term care following severe TBI could warrant benefit. So this is what we have understood so far from our rehabilitation process. I would like to end by this story, which was even a great motivation for all of us. The patient whom I have shown in this picture is Anita, who had a traumatic brain injury in 2007. She was 9 years at that time, and she was studying 4th grade. And some of her problems were like she was having frequent seizures, and then she was having problems related to cognition, speech, mobility, and hand functions were affected, and she was not able to attend school. These are our major concerns. So as I presented earlier, if you take ICF, she had problems related to her body, that is impairment, that is cognition, speech, mobility, and hand functions. Then she was not able to do activities, and in turn, it affects her participation, that is not able to go to school or not able to play with others. So she was undergoing treatment in Rehabilitation Institute for 3 months' time, and various rehab professionals have rehabilitated her to overcome these difficulties. And then later, after intensive rehabilitation was over, she has been asked to go back to the school, but the school was not ready to take her because she was having one side hemiplegia. After this, cognitively she has improved, but she was continuing to have physical problem like limitation in one side of her body. So right side she was not able to use. So we have taught her to write with the left hand, and various things that we have taught her to use one-handed techniques. And then we approached the school. Still the school management was not willing to take her back. Then with the help of the social workers, we visited few other schools. Finally, one school came forward to take her back, and then constant support, she was able to score well. And even the school authorities were very happy to see her academic performance. But after this time, what happened? She continued schooling till 10th standard. After her 10th standard, she could not continue. Her education because of various family and financial issues. She was not able to continue her schooling. So from 10th standard onwards, 3 years, she stopped going back to school. And then during one of our rehab Nella, TBA rehab Nella, she came back to us as a grown-up child. and still that she was having hemiplegic presentation on one side of her body, and she reported to us that last 3 years she was not going to school because of the family and financial constraints. Then we have taken her, and then we asked her to come to Rehabilitation Institute on a regularly basis. We have strengths and weaknesses, and then we have taught a few things like computer handling, basic computer skills. So we thought, since she had one hand where she was having good volunteer control in one side, that is a normal side. So we have taught her one hand typing and a few other skills related to her vocation. And then through one of the local NGO, we have given her, we requested her one supermarket locally, and they were willing to give her a job. And then she was resettled in a job. So she was successfully going to the job regularly. And recently, one of her relative came forward to marry her, and she got married 2 years ago in 2018. She got married. This is how that Anita's stories have gone. So based on this story, what I'm trying to tell you is that, as I said, she had in the year 2007, but to reintegrate into the community, it took a very long time, nearly 12 years she took to reintegrate into the community at various levels. So traumatic brain injury care doesn't stop with inpatient rehabilitation, but a continuous support from the rehabilitation team is required to take them to the different aspects of life, like in terms of school integration, in terms of vocational reintegration, and in terms of community participation. So rehabilitation efforts are not just ending within the hospital setup, it has to be continued even further. This is what I would like to tell from this Anita's story. With this, we have come to an end of my presentation. Now this session is open for discussions. If you have any suggestions, any clarifications, you can go ahead now. Rima?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Let me check the question, sir. So one question is, can you suggest any home or environment modification for TBI patient in rural areas according to their economic situation for better recovery after hospital rehabilitation?
Yeah, this is a good question. But only thing is, we need to have a clear idea about the patient. Yeah, this rural modification or home modification, we cannot suggest anything without seeing the patient's home surroundings. So if you have a pictures of, like I said, in our rehabilitation program, we divide that into 2 phases. In the second phase, what we do is, an occupational therapist along with the social worker tries to visit the patient's home, identify the living condition, then come back and then make suggest necessary modification to the patient. So we need to have a basic understanding about the patient's home surroundings before suggesting any this thing. That is one side. Second side is, we need to know the patient's limitations also, because not 2 patients are same. Suppose traumatic brain injury patients, one patient may have one side hemiplegia, or one patient may have only mobility limitations. So we need to identify what is their limitation. Accordingly, we can suggest. Like what I'm trying to say is, we don't have any ready-made solutions for this.
Yes, thank you, sir. Sir, another question is, could you can you explain about locked-in syndrome and its management?
Yeah, locked-in syndrome is completely different from what we are discussing now, like traumatic brain injury, because it is one of is due to the vascular insult. Suppose if we talk about cerebrovascular accidents like stroke, then we could definitely cover about locked-in syndrome also, because in CVA, stroke, different arteries are involved, anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, like that. So in locked-in syndrome, basilar artery is involved. So the basilar artery is supplying the posterior aspect of the brain. So basilar artery basically supplies the brainstem structures and then posterior aspects. So if the basilar artery is affected, that leads to locked-in syndrome. So in locked-in syndrome, what happens is patient will have consciousness, but the patient cannot respond to anybody. Suppose if you know tetraplegia, patient with tetraplegia, where all four limbs are affected, patient cannot, suppose if it is a complete high-level injury, spinal cord injury, all four limbs are affected. So patient cannot use both upper limbs and the lower limbs. So locked-in syndrome is one step higher than that. Suppose, remember, if spinal cord injury is not, lesion happened at the brainstem level. So from the brain, the tracts are descending. So if the brainstem is, patient has lesion at the brainstem level, what happens is the communication is lost from brain to spinal cord. So what happens again, the patient cannot use both the upper limbs and lower limbs. Patient may have difficulty in responding to your commands. So only way we can differentiate is like whether the patient will have, patient can respond through their eye blinks. Some patient will have neck movements. So through that, we can identify their responses. So locked-in syndrome is completely different from traumatic brain injury. You should not confuse locked-in syndrome with other disorders of consciousness, like vegetative state or minimal conscious state. Because in minimal vegetative state, another patient cannot respond at all. Here in locked-in syndrome, there is no problem in consciousness because the brain is normal. Like cerebral cortex is normal, but the lesion occurred at the brainstem level. So responses you can elicit through blinking or neck movements.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, another question is, what are the strategies used for a patient who is in RLA 4 or 5, confused, agitative state?
Yeah. When the patient is in RLA stage 4, patient is in confused, agitated state, he just come out of the coma stage. So that means in RLA stage 1 to 3, patient was in coma or related conditions like disorders of, we call it as disorders of consciousness, either vegetative state, minimal conscious state and all. So what happens is when the patient moves to stage 4, he'll be in a confused state and irritable state, which is almost like when we get up early in the morning. If somebody comes and suddenly wakes up, suddenly pushes us or something, we'll get irritated because before knowing, before getting that awareness, what is happening around us, and if somebody disturbs our sleep, we'll get irritated. So just a short time only happens, and again we get the alertness, and then we'll get up and do all our course. But in traumatic brain injury patient, what happens? We don't know the time frame. Some patient may reach this stage 4 in weeks time or in a day's time, or some patient may take months time to come to that stage. So what happens? 3 months, they may not aware what has happened to them. So they may not remember how the injury has happened, then what has happened after that. Most of the patient may wake up in a new environment like hospital or say different places. So new faces, they may have to see therapists or rehabilitation persons and all. So the patient, the confusion is even more increases. The surrounding is new and the people are new. So the patient get so much of confusion, and that they will show it as like anger outbursts. This is what happening in RLA stage 4 and 5. So what should happen is, as I said, the environment makes a huge difference here. That's why we talk about milieu-based therapy, environment. So when the patient wakes up or when during RLA stage 4, patient should not feel that this is a hospital setting and many new faces are there. So what we do in CMC is that, suppose if the patient is moving from stage 3 to 4 or 4 to 5, we will give them the therapy in the room itself, where we try to modify the surroundings according to the home environment. Few modifications. I'm not saying that everything has to be duplicated here, but we'll tell the relatives to bring the photographs that are there in their home and show that to the patients, and provide them that the room should be very calm. There should be a calm environment. There should not be any triggers for them, like the stimulus which are triggering their anger or emotional outbursts. Okay, that has to be reduced. We need to at this stage, in confused, agitated stage 4, there will be a more rehabilitation should be given to the relatives. We should call the relatives separately and tell patients are showing their anger outbursts, how to handle them. So the relatives have to always maintain calmness with the patient. They also should not get irritated and shout at the patient. And then calmly they will have to tell the patient, they will have to explain to them what is happening and slowly introduce orientation and attention strategies and all slowly we'll have to incorporate during that stage. So handling a patient at confused, agitated state is very, very important. At the same time, introducing assessments during this stage is very, very critical, because if we keep on asking them, what did you eat, or what happened to you, do you remember this? So these kind of questions will actually irritate the patient, because already they are confused, they don't know what to do. On top of that, if we keep asking these questions, they'll be finding it very difficult. So what we generally do is that we will create some stories with them, like we'll talk about their past or about some general stories. Through that, we try to understand how much cognition that they have. Okay, so that is how we need to handle, and we should avoid questioning them frequently, like what did you eat, who came and saw you, or if any new person comes, a relative, we should not ask the patient, who is this, can you tell me? These are the common questions we ask, but if the patient is not knowing them, that will actually irritate them. So we should modify, instead of putting questions across them and then putting them in a difficult situation, we should avoid questioning them. Rather than we can generate interactions with them, and through that we should try to understand their cognition. And slowly, when they go to confuse inappropriate, confuse appropriate stage, we can introduce our formal evaluations.
Thank you, sir. So there is one more similar question. So the patient who has had subdural hemorrhage in frontal and bilateral temporal subarachnoid hemorrhage. Now he is agitated, has anterograde amnesia, and how can OT manage as his agitation is interfering with the treatment?
Yeah.
So
This is a very good
this is the
question. Yeah, very good question. And they mentioned about the location of injury also, like frontal and temporal regions and all. And handling this frontal lobe lesion is always a big challenge to any rehabilitation professional, because the frontal lobe is very, very important lobe, which is responsible for attention and other important functions. So what happens is, patient with frontal lobe lesions will have
Sir, you're not audible, sir.
to the rehabilitation professionals, because frontal lobe is very, very important.
Sir, you were not audible
Hello, Rima, is that okay now?
in between.
Is that okay now?
Yeah, now it is okay. We couldn't hear. Yeah, we couldn't hear your answer because it kept breaking.
Okay. This question was very specific. They asked about like how to handle a patient with frontal lobe lesions. We should admit that handling a frontal lobe lesion patient is very, very difficult. It's a big challenge for the rehabilitation professionals, because frontal lobe is very, very important for attention and other basic structures. Even our motor cortex is located in the frontal lobe. Motor cortex for movements and also for speech also, like Broca's area is located in the frontal lobe. So patients will have exhibit so many other problems if they have lesion in the frontal lobe. Maybe I'll ask you to read up. There is a big story about a person called Phineas Gage, who was a brain injured individual, and he had frontal lobe lesion. And so many neurologists and rehabilitation professionals have learned a lot from this Phineas Gage example. Phineas Gage, if you Google Phineas, if you type Phineas Gage in Google, you will have a very nice story about this person. His brain is still kept preserved in UK. They are learning so many things from the various behavior that was exhibited by this person called Phineas Gage. It was happening in 1850s, but so many theories have come based on this person. So we need to read a lot to understand this frontal lobe lesions and all, because each patient behaves differently. Like each frontal lobe patient behaves differently. So according to the patient problems, we need to provide therapy.
Okay, sir. We can have two more questions, sir. So one question is, can you give a clear differentiation between coup and counter coup injury, since it creates chaos among many of us?
Coup and counter coup injuries and all, like it depends upon like how the brain is rotating around the brainstem. Suppose if the what to say, any injury happens, depends upon the impact. The patient may have these different mechanisms of injuries. Like sometimes the we all know the neuroanatomy, like brain, the cerebral cortex is there in the top, and then beneath cerebral cortex you have the brainstem structures. So what happens is when the impact is huge, the brain sometimes rotates around the this brainstem. So that causes various damage to the this thing, the brain neuronal cells. And like prognostic wise, those who have diffuse axonal injuries may have poorer outcomes. And if it is like a local damage, suppose if the damage is directly on the, suppose for example patient has damage in the anterior part of the brain, like the patient skull went and hit against the hard object, so that particular part will be damaged, like frontal lobe or any particular region of the brain will be affected. So if the particular region is affected, patient will have problems related to that. But if the cerebral cortex surrounds, like rotates around the brainstem, that causes like various damages, like many other neuronal circuits will be affected. So that causes poorer prognostic outcomes.
Thank you, sir. Last question. What should our approach be once the patient has plateaued in terms of every activity or therapy and long-term plan or therapy?
What if the patient is plateaued?
Yeah, what should be our approach once the patient has plateaued?
Yeah. See, this traumatic brain injury is not like any other conditions. It is very unique. Not all the patient will recover completely. At the same time, we cannot deny that recovery will not happen also. Okay, there is scope for recovery. We have one wheelchair patient who's like a facilitator to us. Like he comes and talks to our patient. He's a patient with spinal muscular atrophy. From birth, he was having this injury. So when we have interaction with our patients with traumatic brain injury and all, once this person has given a very explanation, which I won't forget. He explained this to the group of TBI patients, and he said was, suppose if it is complete spinal cord injury, suppose let us say that a particular patient has a complete spinal cord injury, that means there is lesion is complete, and person became a paraplegia. So the chances of that patient getting back to like ambulation is very, very difficult. If it is a complete lesion, chances are very, very minimal. Patient cannot walk at all. But in brain injury, there is still some scope for recovery, because if there are some tracks, if some tracks are intact, there is some scope for brain injured individuals. I'm not saying that traumatic brain injury is better than spinal cord injury, but one scope is there in traumatic brain injury, that there may be ongoing recovery even after years of injury. Even many recent literature says that traumatic brain injury patients are recovering even after 5 years, 10 years post injury. So we'll have to patiently wait and see, and then continue. What happens in CMC is that in acute care, I explained the acute care management. In the acute care, what happens is patient will be admitted in acute.
Sir, again, your voice is not clear, sir.
Yeah, sorry.
It is interrupted.
Yeah. Is it okay now? Hello, Rima, is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yes,
now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We can hear.
In CMC, what happens is during in CMC, during the acute care management, we will continue to use these kind of measures, coma recovery scale, WIM scale and all. We'll see whether the patient is progressing or reaching a plateau stage. Suppose if the patient is reaching a plateau stage, keeping the patient for a prolonged period of time in the hospital may incur a lot of medical expenditure. Patient has to pay a lot for the medical expenditure. So we suggest the patient that you can go back to home we'll provide you the home program. So you can continue to do sensory stimulation at home. If you feel any recovery is happening, you can come back to us, and then we will provide a admission, and then we'll see then onwards like what to do. But some patients get stuck. They may plateau for some time. So those kind of patients, again, we'll discharge them and ask them to continue the therapy at home. And yeah, instead of wasting their time and resources by keeping them in the hospital, we can discharge them and they can continue the therapy at home and continue to monitor whether any recovery is happening in the later stages. But once you know that if it is plateauing or taking time, it happens very in few patients. So that time, like again, putting our energy and resources, we need to be careful. Like case by cases, we need to think and decide whether we need to provide care or we'll stop for some time and then revisit them little later. I know this question is not this answer is not direct, but we need to understand the nature of traumatic brain injury also, because we can't give them the guarantee that from plateau stage, if you provide therapy again, they will pick up. So we'll have to see the nature of their course of recovery and then decide, because rehabilitation alone will not provide recovery. The type of damage what they've had, how much neurons are intact. So many different factors are playing here.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, I would like anyone to share your feedback regarding the session.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah,
I'm Shrija from Sri Ramachandra, pursuing BOT final year. The presentation was really very informative, sir. Explanation about the prevalence, causes, and the measuring the severity of TBI using the scales and the recovery process along with the stages of recovery was in a detailed manner. And especially the impact of traumatic brain injury on family was explained clearly. And hearing about the care pathway of CMC was very peculiar to hear, and hopefully everyone would have understood the OT perspective of CHRP for persons with TBI. And the real life story of Anita was great and inspiring as well. Thank you for this excellent presentation, sir. Just waiting and expecting few more sessions from you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rija. Anyone else?
Yeah, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. This is Ilango from BOT second year from Striga. This was a very wonderful session, sir. It was very simple and easy to grab.
Sorry.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello.
Tell me your name again. Sorry.
Yes, sir. I am Ilango from Striga, sir, studying BOT second year.
SRMC.
Ilango,
Yes,
sir.
Ilango.
Yes, sir.
Which?
SRMC, Striga, Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Education and Research.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sir. It was a wonderful presentation, sir. So it was easy and simple to understand, so we can easily grasp. It is very helpful for future use when we're dealing with the patients with traumatic brain injury. The Anita story was a very great motivation for us. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rango. Thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Ilango, for giving feedback. Now I would like to formally move on to our vote of thanks session. So I would like to thank the administration of Institute of Higher Education and Research, Sri Ramachandra, and TN IOTA for giving us this opportunity. I extend our gratitude to Dr. Samuel Kamlesh Kumar for accepting our invitation and agreeing to speak to us. Thank you, sir, for detailedly giving the information about the CHRPS, and thank you for showing us the Anita story and inspiring and encourage all of us. I thank all the participants who are attending the webinar from various places. Thank you for your cooperation and responses, and thank you for making this session interactive by asking questions. A special mention to our HOD Raghuram sir and Assistant Professor Sundar sir for their guidance. And also I would like to thank Shanmuga Priya, who is a third student, for helping us technically. And last but not the least, I would like to thank all the students, staff and faculty of Sri Ramachandra for their support and cooperation. Once again, thank you, sir. Thank you all, and have a nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Rima,
much.
madam. Yeah, yeah, thank you.